You've got the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl, Penn State and Clemson. Who would have thought preseason, Wes? Two teams that were preseason top five. If I had told you, hey, they'll be playing in the postseason, you'd be thinking quarterfinals, semifinals, national championship. Nope. Noon Eastern at Yankee Stadium in a game that we could just call the opt-out bowl, because who the hell is going to be playing in this game?
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in. Another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Murray. Merry Christmas to all. We have Santa Wes as a part of the podcast here on this Christmas Eve. Mr. Reynolds, I don't know, do you even need any more Christmas presents based off of the year that your beloved Hoosiers have had?
Yeah, my Christmas is coming on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. So I'm actually waiting to get through this one holiday just to get to the next one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're saying forget Christmas. We want New Year's Day.
Yes.
There at the Rose Bowl, first time since 1967. Just a little programming note for all of you. This will be more of a brief podcast. We are talking the bowl games on the 27th, the 29th. Wes will be back next week. We will go in depth on the quarterfinals before he embarks to the Rose Bowl. Matt Humans will be back. So we won't go too crazy here, but we haven't talked since the quarterfinals came and went. And on last Friday night, Alabama took care of business, comes back to beat Oklahoma. And we had discussed that game quite a bit. It goes a little bit more, I don't know how to describe how that game ultimately played out, but Alabama gets the win, gets the cover, obviously, because that game went off around Pick'em. You saw late steam come in on Oklahoma. Didn't feel great for my bet early on in that game, but as someone who will be in attendance for that Rose Bowl, what did you make of that Alabama performance, and what do you make of this line right now that has Indiana either a 6.5 or 7-point favorite on New Year's Day?
Alabama certainly showed resolve, and you have to give them credit for that, because it looked over early as Oklahoma jumped off to that 17-0 lead. They failed to connect on that long ball from Mateer, and then all of a sudden special teams took over. Oklahoma just made a couple mistakes, and that's all it took. The pump block that sets up the touchdown, the pick six at the end of the half. If you really go inside the numbers with Alabama, not really all that impressive. They had 12 first downs. They got out first down 18-12. 2 of 12, by the way, on third down, 260 yards of offense. Couldn't run the ball at all, had 28 yards on the ground. And Ty Simpson got sacked 4 times. And now all of a sudden, all you're getting is the talk of, well, I think Alabama, and they're kind of trying to have it both ways. I think some in the national media, like Indiana deserves to be favorite and they're number one, but there's the but, right? And I think that you're seeing it here at Alabama. Of all these 4 playoff games, all these 4 quarterfinals, they have the most look of a public underdog. I think that they're going to get back because Indiana's not going to get the benefit of the doubt. If you put Ohio State on that line or Georgia on that line with Indiana's resume and what they've done this season, nobody would be second guessing them. But they are, because it's Indiana. And I think this is going to dance around 6.5 or 7. And, anything under 7, I think is worth a lay on Indiana. I was not all that impressed with Alabama. I don't think Indiana should fear these guys at all.
You got the Curt Cignetti ties to this game, too, with him being on Nick Saban's staff. He leaves to go to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, works his way up. Now he's obviously at the big Indiana. Kalen DeBoer, he was on Indiana's staff when Michael Penix was there. So you do have some of those unique ties. There's no doubt. LT Overton, you did get news that he is expected back, which I think will be a nice boost there for Alabama. So you mentioned, the look of a public dog being Alabama. What do you make, just early kind of thoughts of the other 3 games? We've got one that's kind of around a pick'em, Oregon and Texas Tech. We can dive into that game here in just a moment. But Miami and Ohio State, I'm going to be patient here. I would be curious if this gets to 10, which it might ultimately get there. Look, you saw this Ohio State team in person, Wes. This was the last time they played was the Big Ten championship game. And watching Miami and their defense and the way they played against A&M, is this number too high for you? What do you make of New Year's Eve, Miami and Ohio State?
Yeah, that 10 appeared for about like 10 seconds, I think, at the Westgate Superbook here in town, and then it disappeared. I think that's what we're waiting for. Low total here, 42 and a half. Miami, as you mentioned, Tim, they sacked Marcel Reed 7 times. And Ohio State, have they improved their protection? Because Indiana got to Julian Sayin 5 times in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. It is Ryan Day now going to be calling the plays with Hartline now gone, having taken the job at University of South Florida. So, I think that this is a good defensive line for the Canes, and I think that they can get pressure on these guys. And A&M really didn't run the ball all that great either in that game. Despite the fact that you think with a low-scoring game, there was a lot of running of the football. There wasn't a lot of gaining yards, though. Only 89 on the ground for Texas A&M. And Ohio State, I felt, kind of struggled to run the football against Indiana. So, there's the expectation that the defending national champion, and maybe rightfully so, is going to come out and get that bad taste out of their mouth, and they're going to come out hellfire and brimstone here. But I don't know. I think Miami, you saw that line rise a little bit on the opener because Miami was in a dogfight and only had 12 first downs, didn't even get 300 yards. But yeah, if this gets to 10, I think that is a little bit high. And then, you just look at it, and Ohio State, I think, is going to get the public action because they're Ohio State and they're defending national champions. But there's going to be a little bit more buyback, I think, on Miami.
Yeah, I'm going to be patient on that one. I think Miami, the more I think about it, with that low total, with the defense that we've seen from them, and, you're always worried about how that offense might come together, but they got some athletes, man. There's no doubt. And the biggest spread of the quarterfinals right now, Oregon and Texas Tech. Look, people who know me and know you, and we don't really like to lay numbers, and maybe this is what I get for laying it. And it was a public play, and I said it on the Tailgate Show with Chuck Esposito when he told me that at stations it was 77% of tickets were on Oregon. The market started to come in on James Madison. I said, all right, well, I guess I'm on the square side here, and it's 48-13 ball at the 9-yard line going in, and it looks like it's going to be easy cover city here for Oregon against James Madison. And then, as we all know how that thing unfolded, it was that was rough.
Little did you know, Tim, that James Madison signed up for 60. As our friend Stanford Steve would often say.
Yeah, they did. They signed up, and Oregon's defense did not sign up for 60. And they were letting James Madison move the ball late in that game. There was no answer really for Oregon's offense except for a horrific turnover from Dante Moore. If he doesn't throw that interception, they kick a field goal. It's 51-13. They're not getting in the back door, but bad beats are part of what we do.
How about when the kid takes a knee on the 1? When he's trying to do a touchback and they give it to him on the 1, it's like, well, there that went. And I even said that. I was like, there that went. They're not getting in the back door here. And the Dukes had other ideas.
Yeah, so they do. They get back into the back door. So what do you now make of this spot here? This was the game I think all of us were very curious about when the bracket came out, 5 versus 4. Do you come away from that game discouraged by Oregon, encouraged? Neither? Is this a spot now where Texas Tech seems like they're more of the right side? I'm still having a hard time kind of figuring this one out. Slight lean towards Texas Tech, but I haven't really bet this one yet. I'm curious how this market ultimately bets this game.
Yeah, I think maybe, is it a blessing in disguise for Oregon that they kind of failed to execute really there in the second half and maybe let the foot off the gas a little bit, where Dan Lanning, I think, really gets their attention. And that could very well work in Oregon's favor. Look, not much disparity between the two defenses. Texas Tech third, and I think Oregon now eighth overall. Texas Tech number one, by the way, in the country against the run, only giving up 68 yards on the ground, which makes me lean a little bit their way, at least at first glance. I have not bet this as of yet. And I think you're probably going to get a two-way dance here in terms of the number. I don't think it's going to be one-way traffic either way. Texas Tech backers probably waiting to see if they can get a little bit more closer to 3, but you got a defense that could stop the run, and they probably, of the top 4 seeds, are getting maybe the least discussion right now because the Big 12, I don't think has had the visibility as a conference, certainly as the SEC or the Big 10. So small lean to Oregon, at least here early on, but not with a lot of conviction.
All right, lastly, and once again, we'll dive into these games more in depth next week, but just kind of early blush. I did bet Georgia on open at 6.5. I thought this would get to 7. It really hasn't. Maybe this is the public side again, and I'm going to kick myself here. A couple things led me to betting Georgia here in this spot. Kirby Smart, first and foremost, they lost the Sugar Bowl a year ago to Notre Dame. It was, that unfortunate situation. The game got pushed from New Year's Day to January 2nd because of the tragedy that happened on Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve. But Kirby Smart, of, all these coaches to an extent, Wes, this, are crazy from a motivational standpoint, all of that. But what I'm very curious about regarding Ole Miss, and I think a lot of us, and you had a great call on Ole Miss first half. I had some Ole Miss first half, tailed you on that play, and I'm curious to see how this team turns the page from, okay, middle fingers up in the air to Kirby, to Lane Kiffin and everybody. Now you got to turn that page. You got to go get ready for Georgia, a team who the last time we saw them, Wes, was dominating Alabama in the SEC championship game. So I like Georgia here in this spot. I laid the 6.5. I don't know. Maybe it's another spot where I'm looking like a square and Mississippi gets in the back door. But I think this is a really intriguing spot for me to look at Georgia. What do you make of Ole Miss and how they bounce back from this particular spot here?
I think I'm going to be with you on the mean machine in the red and black, the Georgia Bulldogs, because the defense is finally kind of looking like the defense of a couple years ago. Maybe not quite that level when they won the back-to-back national championships, but if you go with the last 4 games, and they played Texas, Charlotte, so obviously a down opponent there, a pretty solid Georgia Tech team, and then Alabama in the SEC championship. And they haven't given, I think 81 yards was the most that they gave up on the ground in any of those 4 games. The opponents went 10 of 48 on third down, so that's a little over 20%. Georgia forced 5 turnovers, 9 sacks in those 4 games. So you're starting to see this offense or defense get a little bit better. And offensively, the offensive line did struggle early in the season, but it started to get better because we've talked about that as a recurring theme on the podcast. It's like they're not as dominant really up front as they usually are. But then when the dust settles, they only gave up 18 sacks all year. They were 5th in the SEC in rushing, 186 yards a game, after they couldn't run the ball at all last year. Now, when they get to potentially a semifinal matchup in the Fiesta Bowl with maybe a Miami, perhaps an Ohio State, whoever they get in that game, or if they even get to the finals, if you can get a Texas Tech or somebody like that, how are they going to stack up against them? I think that's a very fair question, how they're going to stack up. But they've been better physically, and I wonder if Ole Miss, not that I don't want to say they're going to be out of gas here. That's probably not fair. I'm sure they're going to be, plenty motivated here. And if you remember, they did lead Georgia by 9 going into the fourth quarter on October 18th. And then Georgia ripped off 17 straight to win 43-35 and did, I think, cover the number at the end. They really bullied Ole Miss at the line of scrimmage, and that worries me. For Ole Miss. I don't know if they're as good in the trenches. There were times I even saw Tulane rip off a couple big runs, and Tulane really didn't do much at all in that game. So what is Georgia going to do? So I'm with you on the Bulldogs.
Last 4 games, this from Brett Ciancia, Pick 6 Plus, and he has Georgia. Over the last 4 games, his game grader has Georgia as the 5th best team, but Ole Miss not that far behind, the 7th best team. And when he put in his game graders for the quarterfinal round, he gave Ole Miss the best grade, a 90, amongst the 4 winning teams from over the weekend. All right, more on those games next week after Christmas. Just a reminder, football fans, this is your time. Lou Groza, finalist, Kansei Matsuzawa has taken his precision and power to your closet with the Tokyo Toe apparel. Bold design, premium comfort, and 100% fan energy. Whether you're tailgating or tuned in, represent greatness. Visit tokyotoe.com. That's tokyotoe.com and wear what the winners wear. Depending on when you listen to this, the Hawaii Bowl on Christmas Eve, Hawaii and Cal, we've done a lot of breakdowns on this game, and the market has moved in the direction of Hawaii as they are the favorite on Christmas Eve, and the market has come in on the total as well. So we'll see if the Tokyo Toe steps up and has the game-winning kick on Christmas Eve against Cal. And thanks to our friends over at Rainbow Authentics being a proud sponsor all year long here on the podcast. All right, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll break down some bowls for December 27th and December 29th. A busy weekend of college football. We'll get into that after a quick break. All right, we're back. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. And just a reminder, I have been fortunate to be teamed up with Bowl Season Radio for the past couple of years, and I was up in Boise earlier this week doing the sidelines for the famous Idaho Potato Bowl as Washington State got the win there. I'll be on the sidelines for the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl on Saturday, and then I will have the Vegas Bowl here in Las Vegas on December 31st. And if you love the bowl season, well, this is your week. The Coca-Cola Bowl season has 6 straight broadcasts coming your way. It starts Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern with the Military Bowl. That's Pitt versus East Carolina. They've got the Fenway Bowl, 2:15, UConn versus Army. The aforementioned Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl at 4:30, Miami, Ohio versus Fresno State. 5:45, the New Mexico Bowl, North Texas, San Diego State. And Saturday wraps up with the Texas Bowl, 9:15, LSU and Houston. They will also have on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, the Birmingham Bowl, Georgia Southern versus Appalachian State. You could hear every game on SiriusXM. Tune in, the Varsity app, and many affiliates across the nation. Follow them on Twitter at Bowl Season Radio to know exactly where those games are on SiriusXM. All right, Wes, as mentioned in that read, there's a lot of bowl games on Saturday the 27th. So let's jump into those games here because we did talk a little bit about the games on the 26th. Some changes in line movement there. I'm curious your thoughts. Anything going back to the 26th real quickly? The game in Detroit between Central Michigan and Northwestern, the Rate Bowl between New Mexico and Minnesota, or FIU UTSA. Anything jump out to you since we last spoke of these bowl games?
Well, both you and I know are on New Mexico in the Rate Bowl, and now I like it even more that they're wearing the turquoise jerseys. now that might be hammer time. That might be bowl game of the year territory with that angle. But I'm going to stick with what I have on the Lobos. The bowl in Detroit. Lean under. I think these are two very vanilla offenses that want to run the ball, Central Michigan and Northwestern. 11 probably is a little bit high if you made me the underdog, but sometimes you'll bet these day of games, man, and you just got to wait for the line movement, I think, on some of these games. Like, as we're recording, you had the bowl game today with Toledo and Louisville in Boca Raton. That went up to 12.5. You knew that the quarterback was out. I didn't when I first made the bet at 7.5, and then he got ruled out and it went to like 8.5. It's like, okay. And then all of a sudden that morning it's 12.5. So if you wait on some of these, you get some of these numbers out of wax, and don't be afraid to buy against the number. We saw that tonight too in the Frisco Bowl with UNLV and Ohio, a dead under as that got bet up all the way to 67 at one point. And then the first responder, just to cap that off, in Dallas. A lot of movement to FIU here because of as many opt-outs as UTSA has had. Like, they've had about as many as you can get, like transfer portal. I think both the starting corners, the starting defensive end, starting nose tackle. Jeff Traylor even said, hey, they're going to be without 10 to 20 players due to opt-outs, injuries, portal. So you might have the Roadrunners be without 6 or 7 starters on defense. So that is the reason for the movement to FIU. And then it looks like Jenkins, the quarterback for FIU, is back for injury. They're probably going to use him and Joe Pasansky, both. Willie Simmons has indicated in some of the media availability.
Yeah, and Jeff Traylor, the head coach of UTSA, kind of cut a promo talking about these bowl games and all the opt-outs and the portal tampering, all of that. So, yeah, he was none too pleased, needless to say, of how it is all played out. The New Mexico-Minnesota game is an intriguing one, no doubt, and I'm looking forward to it on the 26th. PJ Fleck, it is worth noting, 6-0 since getting to Minnesota as the head coach in bowl season. Darius Taylor, I think, is going to play, the running back for Minnesota, so just keep an eye on that. By the way, you mentioned it on Monday. Tuesday the 23rd, as you look at some of the late movement here, I think all the steam was wrong, right?
Yeah.
Steam to the over, steam to UNLV, both of those were dead wrong. Steam to, you mentioned it already with Louisville, that was wrong. By the way, I had a very good number on Louisville. I laid 6, I think, 6 or 6.5. Blocked extra point, return for 2 points, kind of screwed me over in that game as that game lands 5. But we move on and we try to find some winners. So a busy day on the 27th, and East Carolina has got a bunch of opt-outs. This number moved very quickly when Hauser, the quarterback for East Carolina, was ruled out. I was able to get a little bit of Pitt money line before the market started to go crazy. Look, I'll just say this. I don't really want to bet on Pitt in this game either. I think neither one of these teams really want to be in this particular game. Maybe an under for me in this one. 55.5, 56 out there. I have not bet it from a total standpoint, but I think that's the only thing, Wes, I could look at here. What do you make of East Carolina, who, by the way, played in this bowl game a year ago against NC State, beat NC State, in a game that I believe had a bit of a melee, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
They were not too pleased with one another. It feels like it's just going to be a completely different situation for ECU this year. So I bet I would look under, if anything, in the Military Bowl.
Yeah, I think you're probably right here. I unfortunately did not get the number on Pitt. I think it's the right move. Obviously, Caden Hauser, quarterback for East Carolina, not going to play. So who's going to play? It's going to be Mike Wright. I don't know how many schools Mike Wright has been at. Vanderbilt, Mississippi State. I know those two for sure. And if you've seen him play, he's more of a runner than he is as a passer. Chaston Ditta is a true freshman. See, you may see both of these quarterbacks, so we'll see if Pitt is prepared for both of these. I would think that they would be if Narduzzi is the defensive guy he says he is, even though his defense hasn't been all that great. But who has been great is Mason Heinschel for Pittsburgh once they made that move. So if I got involved now, it'd probably be under here, but moves already been made. You're now seeing 10.5 on Pitt. I think it's probably the right movement.
11 a.m. on ESPN, by the way, that game from Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium in Annapolis. Noon Eastern ABC on the 27th. You've got the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl, Penn State and Clemson. Who would have thought preseason, West? Two teams that were preseason top 5. If I had told you, hey, they'll be playing in the postseason, you'd be thinking quarterfinals, semifinals, national championship. Nope. Noon Eastern at Yankee Stadium in a game that we could just call the opt-out bowl, because who the hell is going to be playing in this game? If I had to play it, I probably would look Clemson, but man, is no conviction whatsoever. Clemson's going to have a ton of opt-outs. Cade Klubnik is going to play. That is a pretty interesting development there. Penn State's got a ton of opt-outs. I don't know what to make of this game, Wes.
Yeah, I don't either, because Clemson, by the way, they're trying to extend. They've got a record of, I believe, with the postseason victory of 14 years. They're trying to go to 15. Now, they're going to be with out of a lot, I think, like, seven, perhaps close to seven starters. I think at least five starters and a bunch there on offense. So is Penn State, though. And Penn State has obviously got a lot of coaching changes. The co-OC is now going to go with his old boss, James Franklin, Ty Howell, to Virginia Tech. Jim Knowles negotiating that money and probably going to Tennessee. Phil Troutwine leaving on the offensive line to go to Florida with John Sumrall. Matt Campbell's obviously been hired at Penn State. This is Terry Smith. Terry Smith, by the way, is going to stay on staff there in State College. There's a part of me that would lean a little bit Penn State because it's like, do they want to win one for Terry Smith? You know, and I thought they played hard for him down the stretch. Maybe they thought there was a chance he would get the job as all the candidates there kind of went by the wayside, and they eventually probably got lucked out and got Matt Campbell. Ugh, man, I don't want to go against Clemson in that streak because I know Dabo really does prioritize that, and he's talked about it, but man, they're without a lot of players. I think 8 that started in the regular season finale, so they're at least down 8 starters combined. Oh, man, I don't know what to do. This might be a day of the game, and it's kind of like, okay, has it moved too far? Or do I go with a derivative, like a first half? Lean Penn State, but it'd just be a lean at this standpoint.
Yeah, I can't play that game. This next game, man, so let's get to the Fenway Bowl, the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. And last year, one of my favorite bets in the bowl season was UConn against UNC. They opened as a dog. I think they might have closed as a favorite or a very short dog. And they just were a team that wanted to be there, Wes. And UNC was in transition going to Bill Belichick. And final score was 27-14. This year is completely different, right? Jim Mora Jr., he's left. He's gone to Colorado State. And UConn opened as a favorite. They are now a 9.5-point underdog against UConn. And I know many of us quickly on open, and I wrote it up for the VSiN guide. I laid $1.40 on the money line, Wes. I threw Army in a money line parlay with Navy. Now at 9.5, man, that number's rich. And, the interesting situation is that Skylar Bell, the first ever consensus All-American for UConn football, says he's playing in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, what? Like, part of my handicap was that he's not going to play. Cam Edwards, their stud running back in the portal, he says he's going to play. Skylar Bell said that he's going to try to convince guys to play in this game. Joe Fagnano, the quarterback, though, is not, which doesn't really make a ton of sense to me because Skylar Bell is like a legit pro prospect. He's going to the Senior Bowl. But Joe Fagnano, who maybe he's an undrafted free agent, I don't know, 7th-round pick, he's going to play, not going to play. So I like Army here. I obviously bet him on the money line. I can't recommend anyone laying 9.5 here, but this could be a situation, Wes, where if you watch it early and UConn just looks like they don't want to be there, they're getting chewed up on the triple option, you probably can bet Army in-game accordingly. Do you have some in-game opt-out situations? Look, historically, betting on Service Academy and bowl games is a very profitable endeavor. Man, this number has gone nuts in favor of Army.
Yeah, I played a little under here at a slightly better number that's available now, but not by much because there's still 44. I think I played 45 or 45.5. Yeah, I'm not going to follow all this steam on Army. I think it's perfectly justified, but Service Academy, I like these guys better as these men as underdogs better than I do as favorites historically. Yeah. And I think maybe it's gotten a little bit out of whack. And we've seen that with the later bowl that we'll discuss on a later podcast, the Liberty Bowl, where Navy's gotten all that steam against Cincinnati. So that's tough when it's moved that much. When it's moved that much, it's kind of like either go against it or just stay away. But I think the under still might be a little bit worth something here.
All right, a couple more bowl games on the 27th. A busy day on the 27th. And let's get to the best bowl game of the 27th, probably, Georgia Tech and BYU. The Pop-Tarts Bowl Notre Dame was supposed to go to this bowl game, but they said, nah, you can eat your Pop-Tarts. But I am looking forward, by the way, to Notre Dame at BYU next year. That'll be a fun game, and some university in California is a little too afraid of
They
playing Notre
replaced
Dame.
Trojans with Mormons, did Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's funny how it worked, but I know there are some people, Colin Cowherd, that are defending USC for this move. But former players like Petro Papadakis and Keyshawn Johnson are calling out the administration and their coach, who has no ties to the university. I digress. BYU and Georgia Tech. Look, Brent Key as an underdog. I believe he's 18-6 ATS now as an underdog as the head coach of Georgia Tech. There shouldn't be a ton of opt-outs. I know that the offensive coordinator for Georgia Tech has moved on, so that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Buster Faulkner's headed to Florida, but for the most part, Wes, it looks like these teams are kind of full go. I believe L.J. Martin, the running back for BYU, is going to play in this game. So I'm impressed by these two teams. They've seemed relatively intact. I'm tempted to look at Georgia Tech here catching the points against BYU. I have not bet this game yet, but this is a pretty good game shaping up down there in Orlando on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's one of the better ones that we get. For me, haven't done anything with this. Maybe a small lean to BYU because, of course, Kalani Sitake was rumored. Is he going to go to Penn State? That Penn State had some interest, and he's been with this program for seemingly forever. And he decided, hey, I'm coming back. And maybe that gives the team a little juice. Like, hey, coach wants to stay with us. We're going to keep building this thing here in Provo. So small lean here to the favorite. 56, I think it's a fair total. I'd probably rather be on the over than on the under because these are two explosive offenses. And especially the Georgia Tech side. And, if Georgia Tech has gotten itself into some shootouts against some teams that you wouldn't expected them to, against Pitt, against Boston College, against Syracuse, who was down to playing the lacrosse bro at quarterback. I think in that game, if I recall, either way, it wasn't very good. BYU has been a little bit more of a defensive team, but this could be a little happy action fun time in the bowl, so lean a little bit to the over. But if you make me, BYU lay in the points.
All right, the game I'll be on the sidelines for a second straight year of the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl presented by Gin and Juice. This will be 4:30 Eastern on the CW and also available on Bowl Season Radio, where me and Scotty Gerard, the voice of Utah State, and my buddy Mike Sanford, former Colorado offensive coordinator, interim head coach, he will be the analyst for this game. Miami back in this bowl game for a second straight year, Wes. Last year they beat Colorado State in this game. They were impressive in doing so. They had a very veteran bunch a year ago. But boy, when you look at Miami of Ohio in this one, yikes. A lot of opt-outs, a lot of portaling. Probably their most talented player has hit the portal, which I imagine you'll hit on here, as that is Cam Perry, a stud wide receiver. A couple other pieces have gone into the portal. And then on the flip side, you have this Fresno State bunch, very good defensively. Offense has a lot to be desired. Man, once again, I'm broadcasting the game, so I'm not going to be, betting on it, but hard to envision Miami having much success offensively, Wes, in this game against a pretty stingy Fresno defense and a quarterback situation that is, let's just say what it is, less than ideal for Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, with this game being sponsored by Gin and Juice, I think a lot of these Red Hawks got their mind on their money and their money on their mind, apparently, with all the transfers here. You mentioned Cam Perry, Adam Trick, the defensive end, Yarborough, the starting corner, and you mentioned the quarterback section, Daquan Finn left the program, just quit the team. Yeah. And he's been
for the NFL, Wes.
He's been everywhere. He was at Toledo, and then what was he at? Baylor. And then at Miami, sometimes I lose track. I may have missed a school or two. Kenny Tracy, their running back, got hurt midseason, so he was really their best offensive player. Looks like it's going to be Tommy Gutkowski, the freshman. Again, maybe you'll see Henry Hessen, who was the number 2, and then he got benched for this freshman. Maybe he'll go. Fresno State, not a lot of opt-outs here for these guys. Had one safety go in the portal and had a couple guys injured on defense. But other than that, pretty clean injury report, I think, for the Fresno State Bulldogs. And you've seen a little movement. It's up to 6, some 5.5 there. Not a huge move. Total obviously has been hammered down to 41, so kind of missed the boat there. Lean Fresno State here for me in the Arizona Bowl.
Yeah, the Mountain West, by the way, as we record this, we started recording this late Tuesday night after UNLV's, call it what it is, no-show against Ohio. Has not been a good bowl season early on for the Mountain West. Now, they could bounce back. Obviously, Hawaii plays on Christmas Eve. We discussed, New Mexico on the 26th, so we'll see. But 0-3 straight up, 0-3 ATS through the first 3 bowl games, and really haven't been all that pretty. Utah State losing to Washington State, the game that I broadcasted. Well, speaking of the Mountain West, I believe this is a bet that you and I share, and is still playable right now. It's San Diego State and North Texas. This is one of the more perplexing games of the bowl season. Look, we all try to beat the market, and I've talked about this game, it feels like, ad nauseum, Wes. I don't think Drew Mestemaker is going to play in this game. I know he has said that he would, or there were reports that he could play in this game. I just don't think he will. We'll see how it ultimately plays out here. I believe the Albany transfer who had went to Miami first is the backup at North Texas. So not a bad situation there for North Texas, but it's not Drew Mestemaker. San Diego State, obviously, they are without their starting quarterback. Denegal is out with injury, and it will be Bert Emanuel Jr. So a guy from Maction runs the ball. They will not be throwing the ball very much, which you would think would lean more towards the under in this game, but you do have a prolific offense in North Texas. But once again, I go back to this North Texas team. You've got Drew Mestemaker, you've got Caleb Hawkins, you've got all these pieces that you would think, Wes, would demand a pretty penny in the portal and might follow their former coach, Eric Morris, to Oklahoma State. So North Texas, as of now, seems relatively intact, but I would be surprised come the 27th if everybody is out there in the New Mexico Bowl.
Yeah, and I know Mestemaker's still kind of been around the program, went to the team meeting with Neil Brown, who, by the way, back after being out a year when he was fired at West Virginia, now back at North Texas. Drew Svoboda, by the way, going to be the interim coach, the special teams coach. And San Diego State, look, this has been really interesting. This, by the way, went down to 3, I think, even 2.5, and a little bit of buyback on North Texas. San Diego State, of course, even though this coach there is, more of an offensive guy, they were a defensive team this year. But the defensive coordinator, Rob Ulrich, now going to Nebraska. So obviously Sean Lewis, the head coach, still there. The passing game coordinator is going to be the interim DC. You mentioned Bert Emanuel Jr., so he's a runner. If you watched him at Central Michigan, and he's a hell of an electrifying athlete, but not a hell of an accurate passer at all. I watched enough of this. I'm like, man, this poor guy he can run like a deer, but he can't hit the broadside of a barn. And you saw it up there if you watched him in Mount Pleasant. I took a little 3.5 with San Diego State. That's where it is. I'm going to stick with it. I have no reason to buy out unless all of a sudden you can get it within 5 seconds that Mestemaker does play, and then this goes to like 7 or something like that, so you got to be Johnny on the spot here. But I think San Diego State, I think, North Texas, you wonder a team that did lose in a conference championship game, which they were right there. If they win that game, they would have been the team that probably got whacked by Ole Miss last Saturday, to be honest with you. Maybe would have put up more of a fight. Certainly would have been able to throw the ball better. But, how do you get up for that now to play the New Mexico Bowl after you were right there to get into the college football playoff? I just don't see it.
Reese Poffenbarger, that was the
Yes.
name I could not remember, who really had a prolific FCS run at Albany, went to Miami, and then Cam Ward came to Miami, so he obviously did not see the time. Goes to North Texas, is in a battle with Mestemaker, loses said battle. Mestemaker leads the country in passing yards. So we'll see if Reese Poffenbarger, the pride of Middletown, Maryland, in Frederick County, will have an opportunity here to shine in the New Mexico Bowl. All right, a couple more games on the 27th. We got the Gator Bowl. This game will be 7:30 on ABC. By the way, the New Mexico Bowl will be at 5:45 on ESPN. So plenty of bowl games on the 27th. Virginia, Missouri. Man, this is pretty, interesting. You mentioned the situation for North Texas. They lose in their conference championship game, and instead of playing the playoff, they're playing in the New Mexico Bowl. Similarly, Virginia, they lose to Duke. If they beat Duke, they're in the College Football Playoff. They're playing Ole Miss. Instead, they're playing Missouri in the Gator Bowl. Missouri will be without Bo Pribula. He has hit the transfer portal there, so that is worth noting. I kind of feel like Ahmad Hardy props could be an interesting one to look at here. He's coming back for another year to Missouri. That's already been announced. I could see him having a monster day against a pretty leaky Virginia offense. And you do wonder, once again, motivation in this spot, right, Wes? Instead of playing the playoff, you're playing in the Gator Bowl. Matt Zollers started a couple games this year for Missouri with Pribula being hurt. So, certainly something to keep an eye on there. We have seen the market come in on Virginia, I think, because of the Pribula news. Anything you're looking at here in the Gator Bowl?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit too much, to be honest with you. This might be buy on a lower spot with Mizzou. Not a ton of opt-outs, according to Eli Drinkwitz, who, by the way, re-signed at Mizzou. So he was going to be probably a relatively hot candidate in the coaching carousel, but he signed an extension there in Columbia. Yeah, I think this has dropped a little bit too much. You mentioned Zollers. He did start 3 games this year. Virginia, it hasn't been announced if Chandler Morris is going to go. I would think that he's going to play, but I'm not really sure. Trell Harris, their top receiver, did get hurt in that ACC title game, so he is still, I think, officially listed as questionable. Missouri, to me, has got the better defense, and it's almost like when in doubt, I'm going to go with the team with a little bit better defense, and I think that's Mizzou in this spot. So this was 7, dropped down as low as 3.5. I think maybe the Tigers are going to be worth the play here.
Last game on the 27th, the 9:15 Eastern kick at NRG Stadium in Houston. It is the Houston Cougars taking on LSU. LSU, 2.5-point favorite, Houston, a 2.5-point favorite against LSU. Low total in this one, 41.5. We all know the situation at LSU, Brian Kelly being fired midseason, Frank Wilson, the interim. Lane Kiffin is now there. How involved is he in for this game? Remember that weird situation a couple years ago when Wisconsin ultimately went with the current head coach now. Why am I forgetting who Wisconsin's head coach is?
Luke Fickell.
Yeah, during the bowl game, kind of one of the more weird situations. That's not going to happen here. But that all being said, I kind of like Houston here. Haven't bet it, but Houston certainly would feel like they're the more motivated team.
Yeah, I think Willie Fritz. Of course, Willie Fritz did coach in that state at Tulane. Now with the Houston Cougars, you would think Houston be more motivated to beat LSU. There's probably some recruiting crossover. The school's not all that far apart, where some guys get recruited by both schools and maybe they were backup plans at LSU and then they end up at Houston. So sometimes you get those kids with the chip on their shoulder, and a lot less opt-outs. Connor Weigman, by the way, did announce that he's going to come back next year. So that gives them the quarterback edge because it's the Van Buren boys, Michael Van Buren, 4th straight start. And, he's an athlete, but he's had a little struggle with accuracy. Of course, Garrett Nussmeier out for this game. A lot of opt-outs, I think, for LSU, and I wonder, man, if they just want this season over. Just the way that they finished it, even though they gave a game effort against Oklahoma, that game against Western Kentucky where they should have won by like 1 million, they barely survived to get the win. So I wonder if these guys just want the season over. Okay, let's get Lane Kiffin in, and who's staying, who's going. I think Houston's the more motivated team here.
Yeah, opportunity to play in your backyard at NRG Stadium too. So I would look at Houston here in this particular spot. Wes, before we wrap things up here, we've got some unusual spots. We got the Birmingham Bowl, Georgia Southern, App State. We've got the Independence Bowl, Coastal Carolina, Louisiana Tech. Anything in those games, we'll hit on the other games next week when we reconvene and have a little bit more time to break them down. But early next week, anything jump out to you?
Ugh. Yeah, these two teams, App State and Georgia Southern. App State, by the way, 5-7 and got into the bowl, I believe, through the APR, and you're seeing them now get 7.5. Nothing I had played that seems like a big jump for Georgia Southern to 2-7. So if anything, I'd be looking at the dog there. And then Coastal and Louisiana Tech, Tim Beck got surprisingly let go against Coastal Carolina, and I don't think that was necessarily all that popular with the players, to be honest with you. DC Jeremiah Johnson going to be the interim, by the way, for Coastal. So Louisiana Tech has gotten a little bit of the money here. It's at 9. I still think that's a reasonable number. I would lean toward laying it with the Bulldogs.
All right, Wes. Well, Merry Christmas. You got your Christmas hat on there, so you're ready to go. I think people will be disappointed that we did not have you sing a cappella for us here on this Christmas Eve, but we will reconvene with you before you embark to Pasadena. We will break down all of the big bowls. We wanted to get a quick podcast out to all of you guys before Christmas here, and Merry Christmas to all of you guys. I did get a tweet the other day. I thought it was pretty funny regarding our podcast here. So Bird Brain said, going through withdrawal from the podcast with games going on. When are we back? Well, we're back.
We're back.
Back, and fun trip up to Boise. Impressive performance, I thought, by Zevi Eckhouse and company. That defense was flying around, and shout out to Washington State for that impressive win. Tough beat if you had the under in that one.
Hello. But you know what? I got the Western Michigan Kennesaw State under on Friday, which had no business cashing after 27-0 in the quarter. So I even told somebody, I was like, man, I'm going to give one back sooner or later. There's a lot of bowls left. Only took about 3 days.
Yeah, it's bowl season can be the giver and taketh away as well. But Wes, Merry Christmas, man. Appreciate it as always, and we will talk to you before you head to the Rose Bowl.
You bet, Tim. Same to you and yours, man.
There he is. Wes Reynolds, I'm Tim Murray. We will be back after the 27th, so around the 29th, that Monday, Adam Burke and I will be on the podcast with all of you guys, and then should be a normal week heading into all of the games on New Year's Day. For Wes, I'm Tim. Thanks to Wyatt Tomchek for staying up late on the 23rd. Merry Christmas, and please, for my present, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast.